The rain-slicked streets of New York City gleamed under the weight of my mistakes, each puddle reflecting a life I'd been running from for years. I was 25, broke, and carrying the kind of dreams that felt heavier than the backpack slung over my shoulder. Then I saw him and everything changed. His name was Ethan Caldwell, the CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, a man whose face I'd only seen on billboards and in tabloids. He stood outside a sleek Manhattan high-rise, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the chaos of the city, and for reasons I couldn't fathom. His eyes locked onto mine. I was just a nobody Malik Jackson, a black kid from Brooklyn with a sketchbook full of half-finished dreams and a rap sheet I'd rather forget. But that night, as the rain soaked through my jacket, Ethan offered me a job. Not just any job, a special one, he called it, with a smile that promised secrets and danger in equal measure. I should have walked away. Every instinct screamed that this was trouble, the kind that could unravel a life already hanging by a thread. But I was desperate, and desperation makes you stupid. So I said yes, not knowing I was stepping into a world where love and betrayal were two sides of the same coin. The job wasn't what I expected. Ethan's office was a fortress of glass and steel, perched on the 50th floor of a building that screamed money. My role? Officially, I was a consultant, but the details were too vague. You'll assist with sensitive projects, Ethan had said, his voice smooth as whiskey, his hazel eyes scanning me like he was reading my soul. I wasn't naive. I knew sensitive meant something shady. But the pay was enough to keep my little sister, Aisha, in school and our mom's medical bills covered. So I swallowed my doubts and signed the contract. The first week was a blur of cryptic instructions and late-night meetings. Ethan was always there, watching me, his presence magnetic and unnerving. He was 27, only 2 years older than me, but he carried himself like someone who'd seen the world's edges and come back sharper. He was white, privileged, and untouchable, so I thought. Yet, there was something in the way he lingered when he spoke to me, a softness in his tone that didn't match the cold corporate mask he wore for everyone else. One night, after a long day sorting through encrypted files I barely understood, Ethan asked me to stay late. The office was empty, the city skyline glittering beyond the windows. He poured 2 glasses of bourbon and slid one across his desk. "You're not like the others, Malik," he said, his voice low, almost intimate. "You see things. You feel things." I laughed it off, but my heart was racing. Was this a test? A trap? Or something else entirely? That's when he told me the truth about this special job. Caldwell Enterprises wasn't just a tech empire. It was a front for something darker: data manipulation, corporate espionage, deals that could topple governments. My role was to be the fall guy if things went south. "You're disposable," he said, not cruelly, but with a raw honesty that cut deeper than any lie. "But I don't want you to be." I should have been furious. I should have quit. But the way he looked at me like I was more than a pawn, like I was someone worth saving, kept me rooted to the spot. That night, as we stood too close in the dim light of his office, I felt something shift. It wasn't just the job that was dangerous. It was us. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk. By day, I played my part, digging through files, decoding messages, and pretending I didn't notice the armed security guards who patrolled the building's lower levels. By night, Ethan and I danced around something unspoken. Coffee runs turned into long conversations about art, music, and the lives we'd left behind. He told me about his father, a ruthless tycoon who'd built the company on blood and secrets. I told him about Aisha, how she dreamed of being a doctor, and how I'd do anything to make that happen. One evening, in a moment of reckless courage, I showed him my sketchbook. It was full of drawings, portraits of strangers, cityscapes, dreams I'd never dared speak aloud. He lingered on a sketch of a man with his eyes, his jawline, his quiet intensity. "This is how you see me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded, my throat tight. For the first time, I saw Ethan Caldwell vulnerable, stripped of his power, just a man searching for something real. But reality was a luxury we couldn't afford. The deeper I got into the job, the more I uncovered emails implicating Ethan's board in illegal deals, encrypted files hinting at a scandal that could destroy the company. And Ethan? He was at the center of it all, torn between loyalty to his family's legacy and a desire to break free. I wanted to help him, to save him, but I was starting to realize that saving him might mean losing myself. One night, as we pored over documents in his office, our hands brushed. It was electric, undeniable. He didn't pull away, and neither did I. "Malik," he said, his voice raw, "this can't happen." But it already had. We were falling, and there was no safety net. We didn't talk about that moment, but it hung between us like a live wire. Every glance, every accidental touch, sparked something neither of us could ignore. The office became our battleground, a place where we fought our feelings as much as we fought the secrets threatening to bury us both. The job grew darker. I was tasked with delivering a flash drive to a contact in Hell's Kitchen, a guy who looked like he'd stepped out of a crime novel-scarred face, dead eyes, and a handshake that felt like a warning. "Tell Caldwell he's running out of time," he growled, slipping me an envelope stuffed with cash. I didn't ask questions. I couldn't afford to. But when I handed the envelope to Ethan, his face darkened. "You're in too deep now, Malik," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I should have protected you." Protected me. The words hit like a punch. I wasn't some damsel. I was here because I chose to be. But the truth was, I wasn't just here for the money anymore. I was here for him. And that scared me more than any thug in Hell's Kitchen. Ethan started pulling me into the inner circle, meetings with board members who eyed me like I was an intruder. They were older, mostly white men with cold smiles and colder agendas. I overheard whispers about a Project Eclipse, a plan to manipulate stock markets using stolen data. Ethan was against it. I could tell, but his father's shadow loomed large. "They'll destroy me if I don't play along," he confessed one night, his voice breaking. "And they'll destroy you too." I wanted to tell him we could run, leave this all behind. But where would we go? I had Aisha and Mom to think about, and Ethan had a legacy he couldn't escape. So we stayed, caught in a web of our own making. Our late-night talks grew more personal, more dangerous. He told me about his first love, a boy in college who'd broken his heart. I told him about the foster homes, the fights, the nights I'd spent drawing to keep the darkness at bay. We were opposites in every way, yet we fit together in a way I couldn't explain. One night, after a particularly tense meeting, Ethan grabbed my arm and pulled me into an empty conference room. "I can't keep doing this," he said, his voice raw, "pretending I don't feel this." Before I could respond, he kissed me. It was desperate, hungry, like he'd been holding back for years. I kissed him back, my hands gripping his shirt, the world fading until it was just us. But the world didn't stay gone. A security camera blinked red in the corner, and I froze. "They're watching," I whispered, pulling away. Ethan's face crumpled, a mix of fear and defiance. "Let them," he said, but we both knew the truth. This wasn't just about us anymore. We were playing with fire, and the flames were closing in. The next day, everything unraveled. I found a file on Ethan's desk labeled Eclipse Final. It detailed a plan to crash a rival company's stock, ruining thousands of lives. My name was on it, forged, but convincing. I was the scapegoat, just like Ethan had warned. I confronted him, my heart pounding. Did you know? I demanded, holding up the file. His silence was answer enough. I was trying to protect you, he said finally, his voice breaking. I thought I could control this. But he couldn't. Neither of us could. The board was closing in, and they knew about us. Someone had leaked the footage from that night in the conference room. We weren't just a liability now. We were a scandal. I wanted to hate him, but I couldn't. Even as the world crumbled, I saw the man beneath the suit, the one who'd laughed at my terrible coffee order, who'd traced my sketches with reverence. We were in too deep, and there was no way out but through. The city felt like a cage, its towering buildings closing in as I ran from Ethan's office. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Leave now, or you're done. I didn't know who sent it, but the threat was clear. I was a loose end, and loose ends don't last long in a game this dirty. I went home to Brooklyn, my tiny apartment a stark contrast to Ethan's world of glass and power. Aisha was there, studying at the kitchen table, her face lighting up when she saw me. You look like hell, Malik, she teased, but her smile faded when she saw my expression. I couldn't tell her the truth, not about the job, not about Ethan, not about the danger I'd dragged us into. Just a rough day? I lied, ruffling her hair. But the weight of that lie felt heavier than ever. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every moment with Ethan, the way his eyes softened when he looked at me, the way his voice cracked when he said he'd protect me. I wanted to believe him, but the forged documents burned in my memory. Was he playing me, or was he as trapped as I was? The next morning, Ethan showed up at my door. He looked like he hadn't slept either, his suit rumpled, his eyes red. We need to talk, he said, stepping inside before I could protest. Aisha was at school, thank God, because what he told me next would have broken her heart. They're coming for us, he said, his voice low. The board knows about the kiss. They're using it to force me out, or worse. He explained how his father's allies had been waiting for an excuse to seize control. Our relationship, caught on camera, was the perfect weapon. They'll ruin you, Malik, he said, his hand reaching for mine. Unless we fight back. Fight back. I laughed, bitter and hollow. I'm a nobody, Ethan. What am I supposed to do against your boardroom sharks? But he wasn't giving up. He had a plan, a risky, insane plan to leak Project Eclipse to the press. It would expose the board, clear my name, and maybe, just maybe, save us both. But it meant going up against people who'd kill to keep their secrets. I didn't want to say yes. I wanted to grab Aisha and run, leave this city and its shadows behind. But then Ethan looked at me, his eyes pleading, and I saw the man I was falling for, the man who was risking everything for me. I'm in, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We spent the next few days in a frenzy, gathering evidence. Ethan smuggled files from the office, while I used my street smarts to track down a journalist willing to take the risk. Her name was Lena, a fierce woman with a reputation for exposing corporate corruption. She met us in a dive bar in Queens, her eyes scanning the room like she expected trouble. This is bigger than you realize, she said, flipping through the files. If we do this, there's no going back. I knew she was right. But as I sat there, my hand brushing Ethan's under the table, I realized something else. I wasn't just fighting for my life. I was fighting for us. For the chance to be more than a secret, more than a scandal. For the first time, I let myself hope. But hope is a dangerous thing. That night, as we left the bar, a black SUV screeched to a stop beside us. Two men in suits stepped out, their faces hard. Get in, one of them said, his hand on a gun. Ethan grabbed my arm, his grip tight. Run, he whispered. But it was too late. The SUV smelled of leather and fear. the kind that clings to your skin. Ethan and I were shoved into the back seat, our hands bound with zip ties. The men didn't speak, but their silence was louder than any threat. I glanced at Ethan, his jaw tight, his eyes searching mine for something reassurance. Maybe. Or forgiveness. I wasn't sure I had either to give. They drove us to a warehouse in the Bronx, the kind of place where screams get swallowed by concrete. Inside, a man waited older, with a face like carved stone. Ethan's father, Richard Caldwell. His presence filled the room, cold and commanding. "You've been a disappointment, Ethan," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "And you," he turned to me, "you're a mistake we can't afford." He laid out the deal. We could walk away if we kept quiet. The evidence we'd gathered would be destroyed, and Project Eclipse would go forward. If we refused, well, the warehouse had plenty of shadows to hide a body or two. I felt sick, not just for myself, but for Ethan. This was his father, the man who'd shaped him, broken him, and now threatened to bury him. Ethan didn't flinch. "You're a coward," he spat, his voice shaking with rage. "You'd rather destroy everything than face the truth." Richard's eyes narrowed, but Ethan kept going. "I'm done protecting your legacy. I'm done hiding who I am." My heart stopped. Was he talking about the company or us? Richard laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "You think this is about your little fling? This is about power, Ethan. You're nothing without it." He nodded to the men, who grabbed me, dragging me toward a back room. Ethan lunged, but they held him back. "Malik," he shouted, his voice breaking. I wanted to tell him I'd be okay, but the lie wouldn't come. In the back room, they beat me. Not enough to kill, but enough to make a point. Each blow was a reminder I was nobody, disposable, a pawn in a game I'd never win. But through the pain, I thought of Ethanov, his laugh, his touch, the way he'd made me feel seen. I wasn't giving up. Not yet. When they dragged me back, Ethan was on his knees, his face bruised. Richard was gone, but his ultimatum hung in the air: comply or die. Ethan crawled to me, his hands shaking as he touched my face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, tears streaking his cheeks. "I love you." Those words should have been a lifeline, but they felt like a goodbye. I grabbed his hand, my voice hoarse. "We're not done yet," I said. "We fight." We were let go, a warning more than a mercy. Back in the city, we holed up in a cheap motel, licking our wounds and planning our next move. Lena, the journalist, was still in. She'd hidden copies of the files, and she was ready to publish. But we needed something undeniable to take down Richard and his board. Ethan hacked into the company's servers, his fingers flying over the keyboard as I kept watch. He found it, a recording of Richard admitting to Project Eclipse, his voice cold and calculated. It was our silver bullet, but using it meant exposing Ethan too. He'd lose everything: his name, his future, maybe his life. "Do it," he said, his eyes locked on mine. "I'd rather lose it all than lose you." I wanted to argue, to protect him the way he'd tried to protect me. But I saw the resolve in his face, the same fire I'd fallen for. So I nodded, and we sent the recording to Lena. The story broke at dawn, a bombshell that lit up every news outlet in the country. Caldwell Enterprises implicated in market manipulation scandal. Lena's article was ruthless, backed by the recording and pages of evidence we'd risked everything to gather. Social media exploded. Hashtags like Eclipse Exposed trending as the world turned on Richard Caldwell. But victory came at a cost. Ethan and I were on the run, moving from motel to motel, our faces plastered on every screen. The board was in chaos, but Richard wasn't done. He had money, power, and a vendetta. We weren't safe. Not yet. In a dingy room in Jersey, Ethan and I sat on a sagging bed, the TV muted in the background. Was it worth it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He took my hand, his touch steady despite the storm around us. You're worth it, he said, and for the first time, I believed him. We needed a plan. Lena connected us with a lawyer, a sharp woman named Carla who specialized in whistleblower cases. She met us in a parking lot, her car idling as she handed us burner phones and fake IDs. Lay low, she warned. Richard's got people everywhere. But laying low wasn't an option. Aisha was still in Brooklyn, and I couldn't leave her behind. I called her, my heart pounding as her voice came through the line. Malik, where are you? She asked, fear creeping into her tone. I told her to pack a bag and meet us at a safe house Carla had arranged. But when we got there, the place was trashed, windows broken, furniture overturned. Aisha was gone. Panic clawed at my chest. Ethan grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to breathe. We'll find her, he promised, his voice fierce. I swear it. But his eyes betrayed his fear. Richard had taken her. A message written in her absence, you can't win. We tracked down a Lita warehouse in Long Island City where Richard's men operated. It was a suicide mission, but Aisha was all I had left. Ethan didn't hesitate. We do this together, he said, his hand squeezing mine. I nodded, my throat tight. Together, we'd face anything. The warehouse was a fortress, guarded by men with guns and no mercy. We snuck in through a loading dock, our hearts pounding as we navigated the maze of crates and shadows. Ethan was a ghost, moving with a precision I hadn't seen before. I trained for this, he whispered, a grim reminder of the life he'd been groomed for. We found Aisha in a locked room, her wrists bound, her face bruised but defiant. Malik, she cried, throwing herself into my arms. I held her tight, relief flooding me. But we weren't out yet. Alarms blared, footsteps echoing. Ethan grabbed a crowbar, his eyes blazing. Go, he said, pushing us toward an exit. I'll hold them off. I didn't want to leave him, but Aisha was shaking in my arms. Don't you dare die, I said, my voice breaking. He smiled, that same reckless smile I'd fallen for. Not a chance. I got Aisha out, my heart pounding as we stumbled into the night. The safe house was miles away, but I kept her close, her small frame trembling against mine. Every sound made me flinch. Car horns, footsteps, the wind itself. Ethan was still in there, facing God knows what, and I'd left him. The guilt was a knife, twisting deeper with every step. We reached the safe house, a nondescript apartment in Harlem. Carla was waiting, her face grim as she bandaged Aisha's wrists. Where's Ethan? She asked. I couldn't answer, my throat too tight. Aisha grabbed my hand, her eyes fierce despite the tears. He'll make it, she said. He has to. Hours passed, each one an eternity. My phone buzzed a text from Ethan. I'm okay. Meet me at the pier. Relief hit me like a wave, but it was short-lived. The pier was a trap. I knew it. Richard wouldn't let us go this easily. But I had to go. For Ethan. The pier was desolate, the Hudson River lapping at its edges. Ethan stood under a flickering streetlight, his face bloodied but alive. I ran to him, pulling him into a hug that felt like coming home. You're an idiot, I whispered, my voice shaking. He laughed, wincing as he touched a cut on his lip. Takes one to know one. But the reunion was cut short. Headlights flashed, and 3 men emerged from a van. Richard's enforcers. Ethan pushed me behind him, his stance protective. "You don't have to do this," he told them, his voice steady. "My father's finished. The world knows it." One of them laughed, raising a gun. "You think a news article stops us? You're both dead." My heart stopped, but Ethan didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his hands raised. "Then take me. Let him go." I wanted to scream, to drag him back, but my legs wouldn't move. Before the man could respond, sirens wailed. Cop cars screeched to a halt, lights flashing. Lena had tipped them off, using the chaos of the article to bring the law down on Richard's operation. The enforcers scattered, but not fast enough. They were cuffed, dragged away, and for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. Ethan and I collapsed on the pier, the city skyline glittering across the river. He took my hand, his fingers cold but steady. "We did it," he said, his voice barely audible. But we both knew it wasn't over. Richard was still out there, and the world we'd exposed wouldn't forgive us easily. We went back to the safe house, where Aisha threw her arms around Ethan, calling him her other big brother. He laughed, the sound raw and real. For a moment, we were just three people, not pawns in a corporate war. But the moment didn't last. Carla burst in, her face pale. "Richard's gone underground," she said. "And he's not alone." The safe house felt like a prison, its walls closing in as we waited for Richard's next move. Carla had contacts in the FBI, but they were moving too slowly. Ethan was restless, pacing the small living room, his eyes haunted. "This is my fault," he said, his voice raw. "I dragged you into this." I grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look at me. "We chose this," I said. "Together." He nodded, but the guilt in his eyes didn't fade. I wanted to kiss him, to erase the pain, but Aisha was watching, and the world was still too dangerous for that. Lena called with a lead. Richard was hiding in a penthouse in Midtown, planning his escape. He'd bribed half the city to look the other way, but Lena had a disgruntled ex-employee willing to talk. "We need to move fast," she said, "before he disappears for good." We planned the raid with Carla's help, a desperate last stand to end this. The penthouse was a fortress, but Ethan knew its weaknesses. "I grew up there," he said, his voice bitter. "Every secret passage, every blind spot. We armed ourselves with nothing but courage and a USB drive full of evidence. If we could get to Richard's laptop, we could lock him out of his accounts, cripple his escape." The night was cold, the city humming with oblivious life as we slipped into the building. Ethan led the way, his movements precise, his eyes scanning for threats. We reached the penthouse, the door ajar, a trap. I knew, but we had no choice. Inside, Richard waited, alone but unafraid. "You're predictable, Ethan," he said, his voice calm. "Always chasing ideals you'll never reach." Ethan didn't respond. He lunged for the laptop, but Richard was faster, pulling a gun. I froze, my heart in my throat. "You think you can ruin me?" Richard snarled. "You're nothing without me." But Ethan didn't back down. "I'm more than you'll ever be," he said, and in that moment, I saw the man I loved brave, broken, and unbreakable. I tackled Richard, the gun skidding across the floor. We fought, a blur of fists and fury, until Ethan grabbed the laptop and uploaded the virus Lena had given us. Richard's empire crumbled in real time, his accounts frozen, his allies exposed. He screamed, a sound of pure rage, but it was over. The police stormed in, tipped off by Lena. Richard was cuffed, his empire in ruins. Ethan and I stood in the chaos, our hands brushing, our eyes locked. We'd won, but the cost was heavy. The world knew our story, now not just the scandal, but us. The headline screamed about the CEO and his scandalous affair. But for once, I didn't care. We were free. The aftermath was a storm we couldn't escape. Ethan stepped down from Caldwell Enterprises. His name tainted, but his conscience clear. I took Aisha and moved to a small town upstate, where the air was cleaner and the shadows shorter. Ethan followed, leaving behind the city that had nearly destroyed us. We rented a small house. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Aisha enrolled in a new school, her dreams of being a doctor brighter than ever. Ethan found work at a local nonprofit, using his skills to help people instead of corporations. I went back to my art, sketching the life we were building, one moment at a time. The world didn't forget us. Reporters still called, digging for dirt, but we didn't hide. We walked hand in hand, unafraid, our love a quiet rebellion against a world that tried to break us. "You changed me," Ethan said one night, his voice soft as we sat on our porch, the stars above us endless. "You made me believe in something better." I smiled, my heart full. "You did the same for me." Years later, Aisha graduated medical school, her cap and gown a testament to everything we'd fought for. Ethan and I stood in the crowd, cheering louder than anyone. The scars of our past were still there, but they'd faded, softened by time and love. We'd built a life, not just for ourselves, but for everyone we cared about. The world moved on, but our story didn't. It lived in the sketches I drew, in the way Ethan's hand fit perfectly in mine, in the laughter that filled our home. We'd been through hell, but we'd come out stronger, together. And as I looked at Ethan, his eyes bright with pride for Aisha, I knew one thing for certain: love, real love, was worth every risk. It was the only thing that could turn a dangerous story into something beautiful.